Hey everybody, welcome back to In the Green Room with Aidan Keene. It's great to be back after a little summer break. I've been busy out on the road performing, doing many shows, but I'm excited to bring you another great conversation here on the channel. Today's episode's actually a first for the podcast because we're welcoming our very first sports guest. As a lifelong Boston Red Sox fan and memorabilia collector myself, this is an interview that I'm really looking forward to. Today's guest is former Major Leaguer Mr. Mike Stenhouse, who played for the Montreal Expos, Minnesota Twins, and the Boston Red Sox during the memorable 1986 season. We're also going to be talking a little bit about his life after baseball, including his work as the CEO of Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity. I had the chance to meet Mike before a game at Fenway Park a couple months ago, and I'm grateful that he took the time to join me for this conversation. So without any further ado, here's my interview with Mike Stenhouse. Enjoy. All right, hey everybody, thanks for sticking around for this interview. I'm really looking forward to it. As I mentioned in the intro, I'm joined by Mr. Mike Stenhouse. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, good luck and hello to you.
All right, we have a lot to cover today, I think, but I'd like to start at the beginning. You know, growing up with your dad having played in the major leagues, which must have been an amazing thing to kind of grow up around. What was your childhood like? Did baseball always feel like it was going to be your path?
Well, before my dad played in the major leagues, he played a long time in the minor leagues. In fact, the guy that started the All Star game for the National League this year was like a 28-year-old rookie after bopping around the minor leagues. That was the same with my dad. So I was actually born, even though I live in Rhode Island now, I was actually born in Pueblo, Colorado, when my dad in 1958 was playing for a low A minor league team back then. He was 25 at the time, would spend 3 more years in the minor leagues after I was born before we got to the big leagues. So I don't remember those early years, of course. I remember a little bit about his first year in Washington, or one of his years or two in Washington, D.C. in the early to mid 60s. But yeah, I was at a ballpark when I was, I don't. My mom, I think, tells me when I was 8 days old, I started going regularly to the ballpark, and of course, got a bat in my hands at an early age and a glove and all that. But it wasn't, it wasn't the formative years of my youth. By the time I was in second grade, my dad was out of the big leagues, and so it was very young. And then we were just pretty much an ordinary family. Of course, my dad had connections and he could coach me pretty well on baseball. My brother, who got up to AAA as well as a catcher. But we were just after that, just a regular family, with a couple of good athletes in it. But it wasn't anything he, bragged about a lot or anything like that. I mean, when I would ask him questions, he would feel free to answer, especially as he got older and older. We lost dad about 3 years ago, and then probably the 5 or 10 years before that is probably when he talked the most about baseball, as he was starting to had nothing else really to think about and would just reminisce a lot. So I think I had a pretty normal childhood, to get back to your original question.
I think that's nice too. I mean, it's nice to have some guidance, but it's kind of cool that you got to discover the game on your own and you really weren't pushed into it at all. That's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
And to get to see your dad, even for a little while, play professionally must have been really cool.
Yeah, the only actual memory I have is in 1965 when after he hurt his arm, he was sent down to the Washington Senators AAA team, which was in Honolulu, Hawaii. So I left school when he went out there in April. I finished my last 3 months of school in Honolulu, and I do remember going to that ballpark and eating the Sai Min, which is kind of a Vietnamese soup and noodles dish. I can remember that at the ballpark. Remember some of the players. That's my earliest memory of my dad, and maybe my only. I don't really have a memory of him pitching,
Mhm.
but I do remember him being on that team. Yeah.
So skipping ahead a few years, I mean, you had a great career in baseball and outside of baseball academically, and one thing that people might not expect of any baseball player, because I feel like you don't hear it that often, is Harvard. And how did you balance those academics with playing at that level at the time?
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier. I was, baseball was not the focus of my childhood. Sure, I played a lot and was a pretty good player, little league, but so did so many other kids. My parents, both University of Rhode Island graduates, made sure I hit the books. My brother, and whatever God given intellect I had, combined with that discipline they instilled in me, I got some pretty good grades and put that along with some pretty good extracurricular, and it made a pretty good student resume, to be able to get into an Ivy League college. I was actually accepted into 4 Ivy League schools and ultimately chose Harvard. So it was, again, just because of that's the way I was brought up. Not I would not say I was brought up in a baseball with a baseball focus.
And baseball wasn't even your first sport anyway, right? In school?
Well, at first, depends how you talk about it. It wasn't actually, my first love was basketball.
Mhm.
I just wasn't as good in it. I mean, look, I was second team All State my senior year in basketball, but I was 3-time first team All State in baseball in my 3 years of varsity high school. I love basketball. Just love the action and the fast pace. I'm an impatient guy, and waiting for the ball to get hit to me or waiting for my turn at bat was often very, very frustrating for me. So basketball, you're always involved in the middle of the action. That's why I loved it so much. But I knew that if I was to have a career, that it would be baseball. Yeah, no question.
And in terms of basketball, one thing I want to ask you about, I know you have a great Satch Sanders story, and I actually got to meet Satch about a month ago. Would you mind telling that story?
Well, I'm going to tell you one, and then I'm going to tell you a second one too. So yeah, so I was, like I said, I was trying to decide which college to go to, and believe it or not, Dartmouth and Yale recruited me only for basketball. Never heard from the baseball coach. Brown University recruited me for both, and Harvard only recruited me for baseball. So in my mind, Harvard was the only one that got it right. But as I'm trying to make the decision in the final weeks, I get a call one night, and it's the legendary Satch Sanders of the Boston Celtics. And I didn't even know, but he was the varsity basketball coach at Harvard at the time. And he had this very deep and distinguished voice. And Mike Stenhouse, I got to tell you, you're not on our list for recruiting. He said, but the baseball coach tells me you'd like to also play basketball here. I can't promise anything except that you're on our radar now and you would get a fair shake. That's all I can promise you. And that's all it took to make me decide, okay, Satch Sanders, are you kidding me? So I did go. He was a varsity coach my freshman year. We weren't allowed to play varsity as freshmen back then. In baseball, we were, but not in basketball. And then by the time I got to varsity my sophomore year, he had left the program and a new coach came in. So I never got to play for Satch, but I did get to know him, and he was one of my favorite people. Very, very intellectual, tall. He's about 6'8", 6'9", thin, deep, deep, voice. So that meant a lot. That phone call that night.
I bet. Getting to meet Satch was really cool, myself a couple months ago, and I,
They still got that air about him.
he does. He walked into the Emerald Square Mall. He was doing a signing there, and he walked in. I didn't realize how tall he was, so I was immediately taken by that. And I was the second person in line, and he was just staring at me for a minute. And I had said hi to him and everything, and he was signing my basketball, and he goes, and I had my shirt kind of unbuttoned. It was really hot in the mall, so he's like, "Do you have any hair on your chest?" And I said, "Uh, not a whole lot." And he's like, "Me neither." And then he just kept signing, and I was okay. But it was a cool guy, really cool.
That sounds like him. That's I've got another story, but we'll move on with the interview.
Okay. So you played in the Cape Cod League as well, which I'd also be very interested to learn about because you had some phenomenal statistics down there. What was that like?
Well, at the end of my freshman year, I had a just a phenomenal freshman year at Harvard, and I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing in the summer. And then a lot of coaches in college, are coaches in the summer league, various summer leagues. And there weren't as many as there are now. I mean, and the Cape Cod League there was a Cape Cod League and there was an Alaska College Baseball League back then. Those were the two. If you were in the upper echelon, those were the two. So somebody heard about me through somebody and saw me, said, "Oh, we usually don't take freshmen in the Cape League. It's usually only sophomores and juniors. They don't take seniors because the Cape Cod League is pretty much for a showcase, for college players to go into the draft. But if you're a senior, you've already been through the draft process. So it's very rare for a freshman to go. But I went and had a very good first year and had a very good second year. And it's such a cool phenomenon if your viewers don't know, you're placed with a family. You live with a family who gives you a downstairs room or something like that. They may or may not provide meals for you, and we pay them a little bit. Most of them wouldn't even accept money. They were just doing it as fans of the league or of the local team. I played for the Chatham A's for athletics back when you can call them the Athletics. Major League Baseball since cracked down and said no more using Major League nicknames for your Cape Cod teams, and they would also give you a part-time job in town that local businesses would say, so you could earn a little money and overnight. So I worked twice at the Wayside Inn, which is a very popular restaurant in Chatham, and I worked 1 year at the Chatham Bank downstairs counting coins. We counted all the coins, put them through the machines, put them into the little sleeves, and then got them up into the vault every day. That was our job. So that was a lot of fun. But the 1 year, my third year, I got hurt and I got hit with a pitch, and the guy was throwing at my head because I was off. I hit a home run and double off him already that day. He was mad. But I put my hand up and it hit me here. And I decided to stay sort of like a player coach. And I became a bit of a tourist attraction. This is a funny story. The year I was working in the Wayside Inn, I was a busboy, and the turnover was fast. Yeah, the busboy, as soon as the waitresses cleared the table, I had to have as soon as I cleared the table, we had to get the new table set for the next group because it was a fast moving business. Well, you used to have to carry had to carry 8 coffee cups and 8 saucers at a time as one of your trips. The first trip you do the plates and the forks and stuff, but then you had to get the coffee cups and saucers down. Well, my hand was in a cast and 3 of my fingers were immobilized, so I could only use my pinky and my thumb, 4 here, but I can only carry 2 on my right hand. So I screwed 2 little hooks into my cast and put the other 2 cups to make the 8 into my cast, and it actually got written up in the paper, "Hey, go to the Wayside Inn and see the goofy busboy with the hooks in his cast." So
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
people did come and ask about it. It was funny.
That's awesome. So at what point did you think, or maybe the whole time, I'm not sure, at what point did you think during all this, I might actually have a shot at pro baseball?
I think by my senior year in high school, I pretty much knew it was on the look. My dad was, as a former big league player, a 20-year college coach. He was coaching at Rhode Island College at the time. He would later go on to coach at Brown University. So he was in contact with the scouts, and they were telling him, "Look, your son's on everybody's radar. Just a question of where and when he's drafted." And while there was some consideration of teams drafting me out of high school, we agreed that we would put out the word unless you're going to offer a ridiculous amount of money. He's been accepted into Ivy League colleges. He's going to go to college.
Right.
So, and I really hadn't fully matured yet as a hitter or physically, so wasn't the player I would soon become. So there was no way I was going to be like a first round draft pick out of high school. So I went to college and I was not drafted, and then I just built up my career at Harvard and the Cape League. It just all built my credentials up. And I pretty much expected I would be a first round pick, which I was, after my junior year. But I didn't sign because it was we'll get into that later if you want. But it built up. But because of my dad's contact with the scouts, we knew by my senior year that I was on a lot of radar.
Right. And so your dad was in contact with the scouts, but were there times where you were in contact with your dad asking him for advice or what to do?
Oh, always. I mean, we constantly, even though he was a pitcher and I was a hitter, he knew a lot about hitting. He had a lot of common sense about the game. And we had some friends. Mike Rourke was a major league catcher and a major league pitching coach from my hometown. My dad, one of my dad's best friends, God rest his soul, God rest both their souls. Mike Rourke was from Cranston, Rhode Island. Mike gave me a lot of instruction on hitting. Mike gave my brother a lot of instruction on catching because he was a big league catcher with the Detroit Tigers. So there was a lot of instruction and advice I get, of course, from my father. No way I'd be the player I was were it not for all that. Even though he was a pitcher, it just rubbed off, and then I could kind of think things through on my own, and I learned to only take advice until I got to the major leagues and was forced to listen to these horrid big league batting coaches, but, forced being the operative word there, but I pretty much took advice, filtered it through, tried to work on the stuff that made sense to me, and then ignored everything else because everybody's got some advice for you on how to play ball.
Right. So take me back to draft day. What was that like? What was the biggest adjustment there when you were going into the big leagues?
Well, of course, you don't go right into the big league, you get
Right.
drafted and you go into the minor leagues, and, uh, it's just a totally different animal. I'm so glad I went to college. But in college, even and especially, you're respectful and yes, sir, yes, coach, that in pro ball, your coaches or your teammates, don't give me this coach BS. Call me Bob, call me this. That's my name. Call me Geb. Call me my name. Don't give me this Cirque stuff. Don't give me this coach stuff. And we're not going to give you any of this nicety back. We're going to tell it to you how it is. So that was a little bit of a cultural exchange. Now for me, it actually ended up being a bit of a problem because even in 1980, when I first went to my first spring training, um, many coaches were biased against college players, or especially Ivy League players like me. What do you think? You're smarter than the rest of us? One guy came up to me very high up in the minor league organization. Hey, I know you went to Harvard. I know you can get a career or a job in some other high area, but that doesn't mean you're going to slack off and try any less than anybody else around here. And I'm like, are you freaking crazy? I grew up wanting this stuff my whole life. I worked my butt off to get it. You think I'm going to stop now? I'm going to work hard. So, but still, there was that bias, and it hurt me early in my career. It really did. It's amazing to think that bias still existed back in the 1980s. We heard all about it in the 40s and 50s and even 60s, but it's hard to imagine that bias exists. Now, college players are a staple of the professional game, you know? So it was kind of weird, that whole culture, definitely.
It was great that you powered through that, but was there ever a moment when you're dealing with coaches like this where you're questioning whether or not you're ever going to get your opportunity?
Um, sort of, sort of. I think a story I can tell on that. One of those coaches ended up being my. So I had a pretty good year in A ball in 1980, and I was. I'm sure Well, I know for a fact the organization said, "Okay, you're going to play Double A." Well, the Double A coach didn't want me. I don't know if he didn't think I was good enough, or he just was one of those guys that didn't like college players. And but I was a first round draft pick. I was being, and even though I deserved to move up a level the next year, they made sure I did, even if the coach didn't want me. So I started playing, and one day I was not in the lineup early in the season, and I just happened to be standing next to him, the coach, as the national anthem was playing. And he kind of looks at me, goes, "Yeah, sorry you're not in the lineup today. I want to get somebody else a little playing time." And I said, "Well, all right, but just don't ever let it happen again." And I was joking, and he laughed and I laughed, and we got along like this ever since then. It's the funniest thing that can break the ice in some of those relationships.
That's awesome. And so, and you finally make the major league, and you called up. What is that like? Playing for multiple different teams, but your first one particularly.
Yeah, getting in that. I mean, look, I had been to big league camp, major league teams, so it's not like the players were strangers to me. I had been come up through the Expo system. I'd been to 2 or 3 major league spring training camps, knew most of the players. But that first day going up to Montreal and, being in that clubhouse, putting on that uniform, and knowing that I'd be going out on that field, but, it's indescribable. Now, unfortunately for me, it would take a month, it would take almost 5 weeks because that season ended the 2nd week of October, or late in the last week of October that year. The manager decided not to give me any playing time. Well, I pinched hit the 7th inning of the very last game of the year, so I hadn't had an at bat in 5 weeks. I'm rusty as hell. It didn't work out too well. So my so my first on-field experience was a lot less, exciting than my first, putting on the uniform, being part of the team experience.
Was there any veteran from that ball club who immediately made you feel welcome?
Not that year.
No.
Um, Later on, 2 years later, probably my biggest supporter on the Montreal Expos was the guy who not basically, who did take the job I was expecting to have away. We had just traded away Al Oliver, our first baseman. And I was a first baseman. We didn't have it, and I was just coming off an MVP AAA season. I expect to be playing first base for the Expos next year. Well, they went out and acquired, for more public relations and ticket sales purposes, they went out and got Pete Rose. Pete Rose. Now he didn't have much left in his tank, but he was Pete Rose, and he couldn't throw at all, so they put him at first base, and I was out of a job. I mean, we had Warren Cromartie, Tim Raines, Ellis Valentine, Andre Dawson. I mean, where the hell am I going to play in the outfield, right? I was an outfielder, first baseman. The first base was open, but Pete Rose got that. But Pete Rose ended up being my biggest supporter. Um, he loved me. We played cards together. Yes, for money. You couldn't play cards with Pete without putting some money on the table. So he was a notorious gambler, at least in that regard. So I can see where his other future problems would come from. But when I hit my first big league home run, that year, he was, because I got some spot starts here and there and pinch hits, but he came halfway out of the dugout himself to greet me, shake my hand, and I've got it on video. It's an old video somebody got for me. So that meant a lot to me, and losing Pete a few years ago was very devastating to me,
I bet. That's really a beautiful memory that you had there. That's cool. And such a legend to have as your mentor as well.
and surefire Hall of Famer. What a tragedy! We're just talking about politics getting in the way of doing the right thing. There it is.
Mm, I agree. And so obviously we have to talk about your time with the Red Sox. We're both repping the Red Sox today, and you know, I've been a lifelong Red Sox fan, and that's actually, obviously where I met you about a month ago, I think now. But which I did not know was going to happen. I accidentally stumbled into that room on Autograph Alley. Nice. I love it. So what was that first walk into Fenway as a Red Sox player like?
Well, again, I'd been to spring training with the team. Had a very good spring. But remember, I mentioned earlier about big league batting coaches. But the batting coach at the time, Walt Reniak, um, I was old Ted Williams' disciple. I read his book. I tried to hit the same style as Ted. And I won't get into the details of the stories, but Walt Reniak had a completely opposite, Charlie Lau, which is a completely opposite hitting theory, was trying to switch me over into that theory after all the success I had had the other way, and I was kind of resistant to that. And he didn't like that I defied. And even though I had the second highest batting average on the team that spring and up there in RBIs, he made sure I got sent down that spring to start the season. So I felt I deserved to be on the opening day roster. Politics played a role that I didn't. I was called up about in May, I think it was, and it happened to be the day after Roger Clemens struck out 20 Seattle Mariners. And that same day, which was a Saturday, also was the day of the old Red Sox old timers day. And so Ted Williams was there, Collier Yastrzemski was there, all those guys were there. You name it, they were there. So that was my first day putting on a Red Sox uniform in the regular season, not spring training. And then later that year, after they would trade Steve Lyons for Tom Seaver was put in the locker right next to me. And Tom Seaver and I became very close over the next 4 to 6 weeks before I was sent back down. But he was the best crossword. I used to do a lot of crosswords back then. It's how we killed a lot of time. Tom Seaver was the best crossworder by far I've ever seen in my life.
Interesting.
10 times. He went to USC and he was 10 times better at it than this Harvard guy was.
I'm sure everyone asks about the end of the '86 season, so I'm not going to. But I'd rather ask about the season as a whole. What made that clubhouse special, and what do fans maybe not know about that team that's not overly talked about?
Well, I'm going to be a little fly in the ointment on that one.
Okay.
And I'm living proof of it. That team, I won't mention names,
Okay.
but when I did get called up for the 10 weeks in the middle of the season there, I didn't play a lot at all because there was, again, all-stars and even Hall of Famers at every position.
Right.
Right? Bill Buckner at first, Dwight Evans, Tony Armas, Jim Rice, Wade Boggs, you name it. Even I can't even remember who the DH was, but they were everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere, and they never got hurt, so I never got a chance to play, even though Buckner had half a leg and all that. But the team was full of, well, not full of, but half full of prima donnas. And when it came to, I was not on the postseason roster.
Mhm.
I had been sent down to the minor leagues. I was not on the post, so I was watching those games like everybody else on TV. I went to one in person. When it came time, no, they came second American League champions. When it came time to distribute the player shares, I had just gotten married. We were looking at buying a house. And we were expecting at the time, we'll probably make out pretty good here. I was up there for about 30, I think I calculated 36% of the season or something like that. I said, might get a full share, minimum I'll get a half share because that was the tradition. I mean, nobody ever did anything but that. But the prima donnas on the Red Sox, and there are a bunch of guys like me, Rob Woodward, Jeff Sellers, Ray Kionis, backup shortstop. There are a bunch of guys like me who were up there for a while, but we never played because there was just nowhere to play. And the prima donnas said, well, those guys didn't do anything. So screw them. We're going to give them just a flat $5,000. Where probably a half a share would have been 10 times that much and a full share would have been 20 times that much. And that was a lot of money back then, especially for me, who never made much. So and there were a bunch of other guys, again, I won't mention names, who fought for us, guys like us, when it came to those internal deliberations. Oh, come on now, we can't buck the system. They're our teammates. Like me, I went and I had a catch in the bullpen, almost broke my thumb. I'm not a catcher. And these guys are throwing these nasty sinkers, almost breaking my thumb, hitting the knees with it. I'm not a catcher, but they made me catch in the bullpen. So I put in my time, even if I didn't do it during the games. And so it was really, really disappointing to know that your teammates would look at you that way, and the other guys like me. So there's something you should that's not generally talked about that team.
Yeah, and that's tough to hear too.
It's kind of bitter. It's kind of bitter. I mean, I'm well over it, but it's something that needs to be said.
Yeah, and that's tough to hear that it was the teammates too. It's not even like higher ups. That's literally the people
Right.
you're playing with. That's rough. That's rough. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
The higher ups gave me the ring. Now they gave me the silver ring. The guys who were on the team for the most of the year got the gold ring, so even then I got dissed a little. I got the silver ring, but still, I was it, still I wouldn't have traded it for anything to be part of that my hometown team. There was no thrill like that possible.
And it's nice too that you're still involved. You know, like seeing you there, doing the autographs with Chris Howard a couple months ago, and on opening
Yeah,
day, or I think it was opening day, celebrating the '86 team. You were there with your teammates, which is cool. What's it like all these years later being called back to do that kind of thing?
that's nice. It is very nice. You know, regardless of what happened in 1986, all of the guys we get along with fine. Everybody, of course, I know my place. You know, they were the guys. I was the scrub on the team, but they don't treat me like that now. It's you know, Wade Boggs gave me the biggest hug in the world. You know, and when I saw him in April, and Stenny, you know, that was my nickname, Stenny. You know, on the team, and Jim Rice was always. I'll never forget a story with Jim Rice. You know, I was a young nobody on the team. We were in Cleveland. I got up early, went and sat by. We were at a hotel on the lake or something. I was sitting by the window having breakfast, and Jim Rice comes over. Can I sit with you? I go, yeah. So not only did he sit with me, but he bought me breakfast, and that's something you know I'll never forget. I mean, that was Jim Rice.
Right.
So you know, little things like that matter a lot, and there's a million stories like that I have. Um, the Minnesota Twins guys were the greatest bunch of guys I ever played with. Tom Bernansky, Kirby Puckett, God rest his soul. Losing Kirby was terrible. Frank Viola, Greg Gagne, Mickey Hatcher, Dave Engel, Kent Herbeck, Gary Gaetti. I mean, those are the greatest bunch of guys I ever played with. And as I say, my influence must have mattered a lot because I played for them in '85, and then they went on and won the World Series in '87. So it was obviously due to my influence on them in '85.
Right, and I have to offer another condolence to you too, because I've been diving deeper into Red Sox history as recently, and it totally just slipped by me the passing of Mike Greenwell. I had no idea. So obviously, my condolences to you on that. I'm sure you guys were good teammates.
Well, Mike was the guy they called up from Pawtucket and sent me down that year.
Oh,
So that was my last day in the big leagues because of Mike. But again, that's baseball. Mike was one of my dearest friends, and we were crushed. We didn't even know he was sick. Now, last time we saw him, he had gained quite a bit of weight. You know, his nickname was Gator, if you remember. He was from Florida, out in Florida. I don't know if he went to the University of Florida, but his nickname was Gator. And he got into race car driving and all that afterwards, but he had put on a lot of weight. When I saw him at whatever other reunion there was, I was very surprised at that. So I don't remember exactly what he died from, but he didn't probably take as good a care of himself. But God rest his soul. Greeny was a everybody loved Greeny. Everybody loved Greeny, including me.
absolutely. Yeah, I've noticed over the past couple of years, and even looking back at games from the '80s and '90s, that baseball has changed a lot. Um, and not just baseball, but even, basketball and other sports too. But how do you think that baseball has changed for the better since you were active in it?
Well, I would counter that compared to other sports, baseball hasn't changed as much as the other major sports have, as far as on the field play. Now, it's certainly changed from an economics point of view, but you know, I mean, you know, they added the 3-point line in basketball, you know, and in football, you know, they moved the field goals around and they changed all the kickoff rules and you know all kinds of stuff and the penalties. You're not allowed to do this. Baseball's largely free of all that stuff, you know, with the exception of the, you know, the pitch clock, which doesn't fundamentally change the game.
Right.
I think that was a terrific addition. The defensive alignment one, I'm not too enthused about, but not it's not a major deal. The only thing I don't like is the ghost runner on second base in extra
I
innings.
was about to ask you about that. Yeah.
That does change the game. This whole idea of all these players are so tired that we don't want to play too many more too many any extra innings than we have to. Baloney,
Mm.
baloney. So yeah, that's the only thing that really, and it again, it doesn't fundamentally change the game, certainly for the first 9 innings, but it's the one rule change I don't like. But I think we can say baseball, even though the stadiums have changed and the television and the money involved and everything else, all the business side of it has changed enormously. But what's on the field is still pretty much, man against man, man against ball kind of thing, and that hasn't changed too much.
It's a good point. And definitely looking at things from the economic standpoint, you're right. That's
Yeah,
where the majority of the change is,
yeah.
And
Oh, the contract, my goodness.
yeah, it's
When
insane.
I played for the Twins in 1985, Aiden, the minimum salary for a big leaguer was $35,000.
Wow.
My agent was smart enough because I had some time in the big leagues with the Expos to get my contract to say that uh, Stenhouse will get paid at the minimum. Well, he negotiated $70,000, but instead of putting it in as 70,000, he said he'll make the minimum plus 35. Well, we had a strike that year, and the minimum was raised to 60,000. So because my agent was smart, and he was just a local attorney, instead of getting the 70 that they were going to agree to, I got 35 over the 60, so I ended up with 95. so that was a but talk about economic. What's the minimum now? Six, seven, $800,000.
Something like that. That's insane.
So I look. I never made the big money in baseball. I like I said, I got married. I married in '86 after my last year in the big leagues with the Red Sox. And while my face value of the contract was $100,000 a year, I was only up there for a third of the season. So I only got paid at that rate like for a third of the season.
Right.
And we didn't have enough money to buy a house. So just think about that. I played 8 years of professional ball, parts of 5 years in the big leagues, and I was not a wasteful guy. And my first wife and I, did not have enough money to be able to buy a decent house after all that.
Wow. Yeah, it is amazing to see all the changes there. It's wild. My final baseball related question for you is kind of a broad one, but when you think about your career today, both in the major leagues, the minors, and the Cape Cod League, what are you most proud of?
Wow, wow. I don't know. I can't answer that directly because that's not the way I think.
Mhm.
What is most memorable to me is just the fabulous ball players I got to be teammates with. From Hall of Famers Andre Dawson, Tim Raines, Gary Carter, who was a dear friend on the Expos. To Kirby Puckett and Kent Herbeck. On the Twins and then Rice, Evans, Boggs, and everybody else. Oil Can Boyd, the great guys. Not Hall of Fame, but just to be able to say I played with those guys and shared bread and sweat and all that with those guys, friendship, locker rooms, camaraderie. That's my most memorable thing.
I bet. And it's nice to get to meet you guys do and too. We met Oil Can on Saturday. What a character. And
They don't make them like that anymore.
definitely not. And we met Jim Rice earlier in the year too, which was an honor and it just
Yeah, he's a great gentleman, Jim Rice. Yeah.
it's really amazing and I'm sure that I was thinking that might be one of the best parts of everything, just getting to play with these guys. Amazing. And the last thing I want to ask you about here, because I know it's very important to you and many others, your Center for Freedom and Prosperity in Rhode Island. Would you tell us a bit about that?
So, some might find it ironic. We talked about my attending Harvard, and we all know Harvard, Brown, Yale. We all know the far leftist positions they've taken that have come under fire by the Trump administration and in prior years for producing, liberal, if not progressive, politicians and policy leaders. But I came out of Harvard pretty much a mindful of nothing. But it was during the next few years in pro ball when I started really, when I had so much time on the buses and hotels and not married with a family, that I really started studying all that stuff. And it was during the Reagan years. So Ronald Reagan was my political hero. And it was because of Ronald Reagan that I became, I guess you could call it, an arch conservative. But what does that mean? It means I'm just stick to the Constitution. That's it.
Mhm.
Freedom, free markets, and the Constitution. I mean, a lot of people say that's a radical position. I don't see what's radical about it. It's our nation. It's what we were founded on. It's what we just celebrated this year. So after a lot of bopping around after baseball, I ended up, I had maybe 5 or 6 jobs with maybe three. I think it was exactly 3 years each and 5 or 6 jobs. I got a chance to apply, and I was hired as an executive director of a conservative think tank here in Rhode Island. We, for a lot of reasons, we had to shut it down, but I started a whole new one in its wake. And in very blue and liberal Rhode Island, we are constantly swimming upstream as a conservative free market think tank. But our job is to advocate for free market capitalistic policies that we believe will help the people of our state more than any government handout might. The other way of thinking. So early on, we were able to get into the debate. We didn't win a lot of policy battles, but at least we were respected enough because I don't attack people. I attack ideas. We're about ideas, not people. We don't get involved in campaigns or elections or anything like that. So we've never been that kind of antagonistic kind of company. We make some fun of Marxist ideas as they should be made fun of, but in my view anyway. But we respect all views. That's the thing, I do a podcast like you. I welcome all views. Now, I don't have people from the left who will come on and debate me very much because they know they can't win. No, just kidding. But 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 I respect all views as long as you do it in a respectful way. Let's have that debate. That's what America's all about. I mean, you look at the Lincoln Douglas debates. I mean, it's what our country was built on. But in recent years, with our Rhode Island legislature becoming even more left leaning and further, in my view, radical left leaning. Our ability to even get into the debate has been, well, we've basically been blackballed. I guess that's what you'd say.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear from me. The cancel culture has taken root. And if they don't like what you have to say, they either ignore you or cancel you. And it's not just the politicians, it's the media. It's the compliant media in our state too. They used to love all our reports we'd put out, and I used to be invited on all kinds of newspaper, radio, television shows, talk about our reports and my perspective, but not even they want to hear from us anymore. So we're reforging ourselves. I've got a few years left before I retire, so we're working through a few different ideas on what we're gonna morph into. But that's roughly the history, and it's sad. It's sad to think that this kind of cancel culture exists where you can't even have an honest debate with an honest organization who may hold a different view than the mainstream in this state. It's a really sad commentary. Um, and we see it happening in other parts of the country. So it doesn't just happen to me, and it's not just happening here in Rhode Island. But I'm so glad, I'm so proud. You asked me what I'm most proud of, and it's not a baseball. I'm most proud to be an American,
Amen.
a true patriotic, Constitution fearing, God fearing American. We have so much to be proud of. I'm so thrilled. I watch endlessly those YouTubes of Europeans loving on America, coming here expecting something totally different from what the media and their politicians told them about America, and they come here and they just love it. And there's a lot to love here, and I believe that there's not many people who are Well, I'm sure there are, but I put myself in the upper echelon of patriots. Um, and you don't have to be conservative to be a patriot. You can be, you can love your country regardless of what philosophy you come from. So that's my main message. Be proud to be an American. That's my view. I respect other people who have a different view. You may like all that stuff. Somebody else, your viewers may like all that stuff, and that's fine. But I'm on this show to give you my opinion, and that's my opinion.
And God bless you for that. We need more people like you because I think a lot of people are going to get to the point where, or if they haven't already, that they're going to be afraid to speak their minds and they're not going to want to.
Well, they already are.
They already
They already are.
exactly.
People already are afraid. There's. I mean, take the Turning Point situation.
Yeah.
You know what happened? It spurred all this interest, right? We heard all about all these new interest in high schools and colleges wanting chapters formed, people wanting to get involved. And the same thing happened here in Rhode Island. And we know some of the Turning Point people here. And one of the groups, and again, I won't mention names, one of the groups and one of the high schools here got together, put out the word they were going to have a public event and invite people to come to they had one of the people from Charlie Kirk's organization was going to be in town to speak. The threats of picketing the event, of causing harm, forced them to cancel event. And you know what? Because of that, virtually every other, at least in this state, virtually every other school-based Turning Point chapter is no more. Never got off the ground because they were afraid. Now, if you're a parent, how can you blame them?
Yeah.
If you're a parent of a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old child and people are threatening you, are you going to encourage your child to keep going down that path? Of course not. And they win. The cancel culture wins. So it's really a sad commentary on all that. And it's my greatest. We've been canceled. I've been mildly threatened before, but but it's just a terrible thing.
It sure is. But I really appreciate what you do and thank you for sharing that bit of information with us. I appreciate that. And thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I really enjoyed hearing your stories, and as a lifelong baseball fan, this was a really special conversation, so I really had a great time and I appreciate it.
Meeting you like I did at Autograph Alley at Fenway Park, and had so many great conversations with so many people from all over the world. I mean, I had one guy come up to me. I'll do one last story, then I'll go. One guy came up to me, said, "I'm from Finland or something like that." He goes, this is kind of heavy accent. It's my first baseball game. Um, can't wait to go in and see. What should I look for? I'm like, there's people waiting in line. I got 10 seconds. How do you respond to that?
Foul
I
ball.
didn't know how to I said, don't look for anything. What I said, I don't. I said, don't look for anything. Close your eyes and smell and hear. That's what you should do, because as you know, the Fenway crowd is amazing,
Well,
especially if you make it to the seventh and eighth innings, right?
absolutely. Well, everybody listening, thank you for listening. I've been joined today by the great Mike Stenhouse. We've had a great time discussing baseball and everything in between today. So thank you for joining me. We'll see you next time on In the Green Room with Aidan Keene. Be well and God bless. All right.